You're listening to episode 76 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Liz DeJulius about how to address your mindset so you can experience sustainable weight loss. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, your host as always, and today's episode is a little extra special for me because our guest is somebody who not only is in my mastermind, but also is someone who was one of the first clients I had go through my Nutrition Business Accelerator program. And I always love being able to show off my amazing clients because I know how hard they work to create programs and services that get great results for their clients. And to be able to have them come on here and chat with you all about what they're doing and about the services that they provide and how they work with clients is just really extra special for me. So today's guest is Liz DeJulius, and Liz is a functional medicine registered dietitian and mindful eating expert. Liz teaches women how to live in the middle of extreme dieting methods and total body negligence to achieve their health and weight goals in a sustainable way. The biggest mistake she saw was seeing clients following restrictive diets that took more away from them than it relieved. That's why Liz uses the science of functional nutrition with the art of mindful eating to help her clients lose weight, live confidently, and learn to love food again. So in our conversation today, we talk about addressing mindset for sustainable weight loss and why mindset is so important for somebody who wants to lose weight successfully, and also some of the challenges that come from when people are trying to be too restrictive to achieve their weight loss goals. So I love Liz's perspective on working on weight loss from a mindful and self-caring perspective, and she's got such a great approach that really does lead to success for her clients. So I'm super pumped to have her on the show. And without further ado, here is Liz DeJulius. All right, everybody. Well, I am so excited to have with me on the show today, Liz DeJulius. How are you doing this morning, Liz?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Good. Well, I'm super excited to have you on the show. I know that you and I have been chatting more frequently since you've been part of my online business coaching programs, but I'm super excited to bring you on the show today to be able to talk about a very popular topic. I'm sure it'll be popular for years since it's been popular for probably decades, if not centuries at this point, and that is sustainable weight loss. So just so our audience can get to know you better if they don't know you already, I would love for you to share your story and to tell us about how you got passionate about helping women lose weight while maintaining a healthy relationship with food.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me today. I am a registered dietitian like Laura, and I studied a combination of conventional and functional medicine. So I completed my dietetic internship at the Cleveland Clinic, and they have one of the first functional medicine departments in a major hospital system. So that was how I got introduced to the world of functional medicine. And I actually went on to work at that department for 2 years after graduating, which was an amazing experience. Having that functional medicine training is kind of rare. Usually it's not necessarily part of your internship or any sort of training. So that was really unique and amazing. And I went on to work at another functional medicine private practice and continue learning functional medicine on my own time. And it was one of the first times where I really felt like working with a dietitian was one of the main components of a patient's treatment plan. And nutrition was such a big part of that. And the dietitians were well respected. And so that was really an amazing place to be. But as I worked with clients and as I worked with patients, I really noticed that a lot of them were ruining their relationship with food because of the interventions that were recommended. And some of it was a combination of just the business model, and it was really hard to follow up with patients on a timely manner. And then sometimes it was just because it was maybe not meeting the patient with where they were as far as how much they wanted to change. So fast forward to now working in my own private practice, I wanted to make sure that we're using the amazing techniques that functional medicine provides, but also really preserving that relationship with food. I would consider myself a foodie. I love food. When I was little, I wanted to be a chef. That's what I thought. And I got cookbooks for my 10th birthday. And I really do think that food is one of the best pleasures in life. And so seeing so many people struggle with implementing what they quote unquote should do, but at the same time, it was degrading their relationship with food, was something that I really felt was missing in this world of nutrition and specifically functional medicine. So then I chose to narrow that down even more specifically with sustainable weight loss because of the societal pressures that are put on for weight standards and how to lose weight and all of the different strategies. So that just felt like a really natural fit among all of that. So yeah, that's kind of how I fast forward version of how I am where I am right now.
Yeah, I think with my experience in the functional medicine world, I think we've had similar, I don't know if mentors is the right word, but we've worked for similar types of functional medicine experts. And I'm sure we've seen a lot of the same kind of issues where people have, they come to get help. And it's not that it's not helpful from if humans just didn't have any sort of emotional connection with food whatsoever, and they were just like, come give me my meal plan and I'll follow it and I'll be like a robot. I feel like a lot of these interventions are actually really valuable, right? Like they do really have a very powerful impact on people's health. But when we don't consider the emotional and mental piece when making recommendations or helping people implement changes, sadly, that tends to become something that is so harmed by a lot of those interventions. And I definitely saw the same thing. And it was a big reason why I took the direction that I did in my nutrition consulting business. And even with this podcast named Fed and Fearless, a lot of it came from the desire to help women understand how to feed themselves, understand how to improve their symptoms, improve their body composition, all the things that they want to achieve with their nutrition choices, but not do it in a way that's creating a bunch of disordered eating and anxiety around food. So I love that you have that philosophy and that you're applying it to the world of weight loss, because I feel like weight loss is definitely one of those areas that a lot of damage has been created or caused by people making recommendations for weight loss plans that don't actually allow somebody to really enjoy their food. So why do you think so many women these days struggle with their weight, even though, like I said, we've been talking about weight loss and diets and dieting strategies and all of this stuff's been in our culture for probably over 100 years at this point. I don't know if I know the exact date the first weight loss diet was created, but I know it's been at least a full century of us talking about it. So why do you think this is still such a problem for people?
I really think it's because so much of weight loss is a part of mainstream marketing and it's a business at the end of the day. And it's a combination of, first, maybe the end goal isn't always realistic or attainable. And so as a business model, it's advantageous to continue to have these end goals that are almost impossible so they can continue selling things that are going to make you think you can get to that end goal. But I also think if we take a step back and think at an individual level, it's really appealing to think about all of the different tools that could potentially help you lose weight. And I don't think there's enough emphasis put on your personal relationship with food and your body and how you view your own weight. And it's more so about changing the tool. So I could try to intermittent fast. I could try keto. I could try vegan. I could try HIIT training, and there are all these different tools that may or may not work. It's not the tools that I think are inherently bad. Some of them are definitely more extreme than others, but it's the relationship that we have of like, maybe this one tool will be it, or maybe this is what's going to get me to my goal. And I really don't think that you can use any tool without addressing your relationship with food or your relationship with your body, no matter if it's the right tool for you or not.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like, especially with a lot of the stats that are thrown out around dieting and how diets fail and everything, it's like, I agree with you. I don't think any one diet is going to work for somebody if they have a terrible mindset around their body or food or health or, using food as a coping mechanism and all that stuff. So, and like you said, some of the tools are a little extreme and probably some of them are downright dangerous. And, I'm sure there's lots of different types of diets out there that we would not consider even remotely. Like you could have the perfect mindset. And if that's the case, we still wouldn't suggest some of them. But I agree that there's a lot of different ways that you could experiment with a weight loss approach that aren't inherently harmful if done in the right mindset and if monitored appropriately and if caring for one's body is the main focus rather than just like losing scale weight at all costs. Just to add a quick, I don't want to make too much of a detour or a curveball, but I do want to hear what your perspective is on people who believe that the mindset is not that important and that diets and weight loss are just harmful no matter what you do. And there's no way around it.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you brought that up. And that was a really big consideration I had when I went into private practice, because as I started to learn more about mindful eating and even intuitive eating and these different methods on that end of the spectrum, it was exactly that. It was another end of the spectrum. And I felt like there was almost this opposite extremist mentality of, it doesn't matter what size your body is and you should be able to love it at any size, and exactly what you just said. And I really just felt negative emotion when I started educating myself in that spectrum, because I really do think that we can live in the middle of the extremes of dieting and of total listening to your body and total body acceptance. I don't think it's bad to want to lose weight. And I think it's totally acceptable if someone has that goal of wanting to strive for something better, to challenge themselves, to improve their body. Not necessarily saying that weight loss equals improvement, but I think it's okay to have that goal as long as we address that mindset component behind it. So to answer your question, I think one of my favorite methods to teach my clients is that we so often think that we just need to change our actions, kind of what I was just saying, of changing the tools, and that's going to change your results. When in reality, we can look back at this streamline of the ladder that comes before that, and it really starts with our subconscious beliefs. And that spills into the way that we think, the way that we talk to ourselves, the emotions that we feel, and that really drives our actions and results. And so in order to really achieve that sustainability in your health habits, in your nutrition, in your body, you have to change the way that you're thinking, the way that you're talking about yourself. And it's not easy work to do necessarily. You can streamline it by certain tools, by working with a coach. There are different things that you can do, but that work can really yield and make the difference between a temporary diet that you're following for 30 days and actually changing your identity into that person who, when you've even created your goals, you're thinking of that person of like, I just want to be that person who it's easy to make food decisions. And it's really easy for me to eat in a way that gives my body energy. That requires changing your identity. And that's possible to do when you address your mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like anytime we have a goal of changing our habits in any way, whether it's related to food or like, obviously, as you know, I talk about business development a lot, and it's like, there's so many tools and strategies and methods and different actions that you could take to get the result that you're looking for in any sort of habit change. But that doesn't mean that you're going to reach that goal if you're constantly thinking negative thoughts about yourself or thinking, well, I'm just not somebody who enjoys exercise, or I'm just not somebody who is good with money, or I'm just not somebody who can be moderate around sugar. Like those those beliefs about who you are as a person and what you're able to do and what you're not able to do, that does, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, as you said, bleed into the actual actions that you take and the way that you respond to your environment, the way that you plan your behavior, the way that you actually run your day. So it's something that I feel like whether we're talking about weight loss or anything, any type of major habit change, we have to be looking at like, who do you see yourself as? And are you trying to fit habits into your life that are in complete opposition to who you believe yourself to be? So I love the identity change that has to happen first, like working on that first so that then the habits can become easier to implement. Not easy, because, changing habits is never easy for most people, but allowing them to become more aligned with who you see yourself as, I think is such a important thing, no matter what kind of change we're trying to make. Let's talk a little bit more about the mindset piece. When you talk about identity with mindset and with weight loss and habit changes and everything, what kind of identity issues do you see coming up for the women that you work with that affect their ability to be successful?
Sure. There are two parts to that answer, because the first is what they come to me seeking help with. So a lot of times they feel like they have a lack of control, or they feel like food has more power over their own abilities and it's kind of taking over their own power, which of course is an uncomfortable feeling. But after really tapping into the identity that they currently have and what they view themselves as, we can actually get a lot deeper than that and uncover some deep-rooted stuff that can go all the way back to childhood. So an example could be that they might not feel worthy of feeling a certain way because maybe that their parents talked to them in a way that made them feel really unworthy of success and happiness or health. Sometimes too, it can be this sense of feeling like their body it's almost a separate part from their mind. And so they feel like they aren't aligned with the way their physical body is matching their internal body. So some people will say, I'm working really, really hard, but my physical body isn't matching that. And that comes down to a feeling of just not having trust with their body and trust with their own abilities. So I actually like to bring it all the way back and think about what was your relationship with food and your relationship with your body as a child. And do you have any significant memories that you remember of maybe having a really uncomfortable situation with eating, or the way that your parents raised you at dinner time and what that environment looked like? So tapping into that, identifying it can be a very big source of relief and like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm finally making progress. You still have, of course, more work to go after that, but that can be a really like turning point in people's treatment plans of figuring out, why is it that I feel like I don't have control over food? And a lot of times it's actually because it's that deep-rooted identity issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like not feeling connected with your body is something that a lot of women experience. It's like your body is this separate entity, and it's like, well, my body's not doing what I want it to do, or, it's not responding the way I want it to respond. And I agree that seeing your body as this other thing that's not you and it's not integrated with your mind and your spirit and everything, like it just doesn't, I don't think it's a good way to live. Whether or not it affects your results, like just having that really deep separation is just not a healthy way to operate in your day-to-day life. And just looking back at probably my early 20s, I'm trying to think back to when I was struggling with body image and that kind of stuff. Like I do feel like my awareness of my body was so much stronger back then in a weird way. It was like I was constantly like thinking about it and like looking at like, oh, what do I look like in the mirror? Or, what did these clothes look like or whatever, like just kind of analyzing it a ton. And nowadays I think about it because I obviously want to feel good. I want to have good energy. I want to have good mental capacity. But I very rarely am like thinking about my body as being something that needs like work, if that makes sense, as opposed to like, okay, yeah, I want to take care of it because it's important. Like I can't function if my body's not doing well, but I'm not like setting these like, I need to lose 5 pounds or like, I can't be happy with my body. Those kind of goals that I used to have when I was in like college and stuff. It's just weird to remember that and remember that a lot of people still feel that way and feel that way like their entire lives because they never get to a place where they feel like their body is an integrated part of them.
I'm so glad you brought that up too, because that's actually part of the difference of goal setting that when I work with my clients that I help them differentiate is that a lot of times we expect to have this outcome goal. So lose 5 pounds, lose a certain percentage of body fat, fit into a certain size of clothing. And the problem with outcome goals, so they're usually very measurable. They're very, like, you can define them very easily. But the problem with that is that there's generally some sense of it being arbitrary. Like, we really can't control if you're going to lose 8 pounds versus 10 pounds. And we really can't control that number. And so it almost already sets you up for failure because you just don't have control of that. So I like to help clients when they have this outcome goal to switch it into what's called a process goal, which is more of a non-binary. So there's no number associated with it. And it's more of a continuous improvement mindset. So instead of, I want to lose weight, maybe your goal could be, I want to improve my relationship with food, or I want to eat more vegetables, or just something that's a little bit more of a continuous improvement, 1% better every day mindset. Because you really can't fail with that. And some days you might feel like you've made a lot more progress than others, but you still know that you're always working towards that end goal and you're working on factors of your life that you actually have control over. So I'm glad that you brought that up because that's a really big point too.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because even, like I said, I do a ton of study on like business mindset and everything nowadays. But even with business goals, a lot of my mentors are always talking about like detaching from the outcome, like having those metrics to potentially see like, okay, what was the impact of that? Like to actually measure progress. Because obviously if somebody wants to lose weight, if the scale is going up, that might be indicative of like, okay, something's not working. Like some action or behavior is not actually leading you towards the result that you want. So in my mind, having some kind of metric isn't inherently bad, but I agree with you that if you're emotionally attached to that metric as being like, well, if I don't achieve this exactly the way I said it, then that means I'm a failure. So I feel like with goal setting, it's like in my opinion, you want to have some kind of way to know if you're making progress. And like when I work with clients, whether it's health or business, I want to know like, okay, well, why track that? Like, what does that tell you by tracking that? Is that a really important metric? Is that something that is reflective of what the outcome that you want is, like that bigger picture outcome? Because again, like there are metrics that people can track that really don't mean anything. And sometimes scale weight doesn't really mean anything. Like you may not see the scale change whatsoever, and you could have a ton of health improvement and a ton of, more energy, more strength, like your body composition could change and that scale could either go up or stay the same. So I feel like with metrics, it's not that we should just throw them out and never look at them and like be afraid of them. And I don't think you're saying that. But I just wanted to make this point that if we can emotionally detach from the metrics and understand like, well, what are the actions and the behaviors and the habits that need to be developed and really focus on executing the habits and, have loosely track the metrics and say like, is this actually getting the result that I want? Then that's kind of the nice sweet spot between having a long-term goal that is a little bit more like metric oriented, but also focusing on the process as being the thing that you do have control over.
Exactly. And the metrics are going to give you some motivation and they're going to help you with achieving that long-term goal because you're able to shorten up that time a little bit and just see if you're making any sort of progress. I don't know your opinion on this too, but sometimes I tell my clients, your metric can be subjective. So we could have self-confidence be a metric that we track, and it's a scale of 1 to 10 and something that they track every morning or every evening. And I still think that that's helping you reach that end goal, but you're still getting a metric along the way. So yes, I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, even those, like that's making a subjective measurement more measurable. So even if it's subjective, like energy is a great one. That's one that I often would have my clients create some kind of like 0 to 10 scale on 0. I mean, most 0 would be like, you don't even get out of bed, which nobody was ever at 0, but like kind of low numbers would be really exhausted all the time, that kind of thing. 10 would be, and also the way that you create the scale is important. Because if I said 10 was like, you could go run a marathon tomorrow, like I don't think, I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll get into running at some point. I would not be able to run a marathon, even if I felt great with my energy, right? So if you're setting a 10 out of 10 on energy to be something that you've never accomplished before, that's very different than if you say a 10 out of 10 is energy is not a limiting factor in you being able to do anything you want to do. Like that's usually what I would say is a 10 out of 10 for energy. So even the like subjective measurements, you need to make sure that those are really appropriate for you individually and not based on what you think is, you know, what other people are doing or what you think is like so-called healthy, because everybody's different. And once you have that scale that's appropriate for you as an individual, then that's where that actual number system comes into play and can show you like, oh, when we first started working together, your energy was like a 5 out of 10. And now you say it's an 8 out of 10. Like that's objective improvement, even though like they don't have like a thermometer that says your energy's at a 7 today, right? Like it's not like a scientific measurement, but I still think it's good to have some level of tracking for whatever the goal is, because I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but a lot of times when I work with clients, they don't remember what they felt like when they first started. Like they don't remember how bad things were or how low their energy was or how painful their joints were or whatever the symptom was. And then when you get like 3-6 months in and it's like, it's not perfect. They're not 100% like no issues whatsoever, but they don't necessarily remember that, oh, when we started 6 months ago, you were a 4 out of 10 on energy and now you're a 7. And maybe 7 doesn't feel like you're fully where you want to be, but it's still so much better than where you were before. So I like having metrics, and I think it's good whether it's a weight loss goal or not. And again, it could be beyond health in general, whatever goals you're setting, like knowing how are you going to know when you're on the right track towards that goal? Like what's your mile markers? So it's not just like you're either at the end line or you're not. Like, you know, I either lost 20 pounds or I didn't. It's like, well, if you lose half a pound a month for, you know, a year, like that's going to be a lot of progress. Maybe it's not as much progress as you want or imagine would be ideal. But if you know that you're moving in that direction over time, then you know that you're on the right track. So that was a little bit of a tangent, but if you have any thoughts to share on that.
No, that's amazing. Especially that last point too, of if it is just a half a pound a month over the course of the year, it is still the needle moving in the direction that you want. And maybe too, it's also giving you that reassurance that you don't have to reach your goals in an extreme way. So in order to have that balance of it fits my lifestyle and it fits my time budget throughout the day, and I'm not cooking too long to make my meals or whatever the case may be, that's still progress and proving that it doesn't have to be an extreme intervention in order to get to your goal.
Mm-hmm. So what would be a sign that somebody is not dealing with their mindset when it comes to their weight loss goal?
I think one of the main things that I hear is that we don't feel like we have total control over food, like I was saying before. And so a lot of people feel like there are forbidden foods. And that means that they're either foods they don't feel like they can keep in their house, or if they do find their way in their house, they have to finish the whole box or finish the whole bag, because the quicker it's out of the house, the better. And I think that that's showing the mindset that, one, you aren't in control of your food options, and two, you don't really have a good understanding of reading your body and knowing what your body is feeling. Generally, when you have this forbidden food and you have the tendency to like either binge on that food or just overindulge in any capacity, you feel like you're eating out of an emotional way. You are eating out of an emotional way generally. And what I like to teach my clients is that one of the first ways you can address your mindset through mindful eating is differentiating hunger versus appetite. So I like to think of hunger as true body hunger. Your body needs energy in order to give you more energy throughout your day, mental clarity, all that good stuff. Appetite is more of an emotional eating. So you're eating to either fill a void or to help you deal with uncomfortable emotions. And we all deal with uncomfortable emotions throughout the course of the day and throughout the course of the week. But some people have really created the habit of making food a way to give you temporary relief and temporary, like, okay, that was some happiness or some distraction, so now I'm going to get back to my day. it may give you that initial benefit, but for most people in the long term, they don't like using that coping mechanism of food. So I like to help them address the mindset that, first of all, you are in control. And by bringing more awareness to food in your body, you might realize that during an uncomfortable emotion, whether that's boredom or loneliness or stress from work, what's going to be the most productive way of managing that emotion? Most of the time it's not food. Sometimes it might be, and that's okay. But I think if you really put yourself in your future shoes of how do I want to feel in the next hour or tomorrow when I wake up, you can identify other actions that are going to be more productive. So if you're stressed, maybe you need to write down a to-do list and kind of just prioritize the rest of your evening. If you're bored, maybe you need to figure out another hobby or just something else to fill your time. Maybe you need to go to bed earlier. There are so many different ways that you can think about productive actions, but ultimately you always have the control over food. And that's something that I think is really empowering to get that control back and to realize you have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I bet a lot of that has been a lot worse in the past year. We're recording this in January of 2021. So if you're listening from the future, hopefully it's better. But as far as the last 10 months have been concerned, I feel like food in the home, obviously if you're in certain states, you can't really eat out at all right now, but just having like treats in the house is something that is one of the few like remaining available pleasures for people. And like I said, hopefully that doesn't last a long time, but I even noticed that for myself, like things that I would have normally not really done, like even if it's just like having a glass of wine, like normally I wouldn't be having a glass of wine most nights. And even in the last few months, it's been like, well, got nothing else better to do. Like, let's have a glass of wine and watch some Netflix or something. And it's something that I know personally I've noticed in the last even just 2 months. I'm like, I feel like this is kind of turning into something that's potentially harmful. Like, it's not harming me. Like I'm not waking up with like a hangover or something, right? It's a glass of wine. But over time, 6 months later, if I continue these habits that I've been doing since like, November-ish, that's not going to lead me to any sort of positive end result. And even if it's just like a little bit of negative impact every time I do it, that compounds over time. And if it's the same thing with positive habits, right? Like even if the positive habit just has a little bit of a benefit, over time, it turns into something that is far more significant. And if we can catch ourselves at the moment of like, are we making things a little bit better or are we making things a little bit worse, and not just keep taking that action over and over that's making things a little bit worse, that's where I feel like you see the most long-term benefit rather than it being this extreme, like I'm never touching wine again, or I'm never having sugar again because I can't have sugar in the house. Because like I don't feel like I can't have sugar in the house. I just know the last, like since December when we, my in-law family is very generous with candy, like just gives a lot of, and they're good quality, right? Like nice, expensive truffles and that kind of thing. And it's like, it's one of these things where it's like, I don't feel like I can't have sugar in the house because I won't stop eating it. But even just like having a piece of chocolate every single night, I'm like, do I really need that? Is that really benefiting me? So I definitely think even for those of us who have a lot of this stuff under control from a mindset perspective, when we're in a situation like we are for almost a year now, where we feel like there isn't a lot of control, it's a little bit like stressful to just like engage with the world. Like it's just kind of like easy to fall into eating for enjoyment, even if it's not like coming from a place of, I'm like unhappy with myself or I don't care about myself, even if it's just like, this is just like enjoyable and it's like a little break from all the craziness that's happening in the world. So do you have anything to say about that? Because like, again, I agree that it's definitely a mindset issue, but I also think sometimes, it can be a lot more subtle than it being this like intense negative self-talk or something that could be driving those behaviors.
100%. I think as I opened this discussion, food is one of the best pleasures in life. So I totally agree that it's okay to use food in an enjoyable way. And I would hope that that's how it is majority of the time. I think the biggest differentiating factor is whether it's a habit and it's something like, okay, I've finished my dinner and now I'm pouring the glass of wine. And it's like, whoa, how did that wine even get in the glass? I'm not even thinking about it. So I like to think of all of these actions that we have, whether that's having a glass of wine or watching Netflix or reading a book or taking a bath. We have all these different options. And so almost think of it like a menu of what do I actually want tonight? Some nights it might be a glass of wine. Some nights it might be taking a bath. Some nights it might be both at the same time. But anytime that it becomes a habit where you're not putting as much thought behind it, that's when I think it can get into the process of maybe not being as beneficial as you once thought or it once was. That's the whole point of tackling mindset, is that habits are formed to help with decision fatigue and to help us so that we don't have to continuously think about every little action we take, which is a good thing. But in the world of health and nutrition, sometimes those habits are set up as such a knee-jerk reaction of discomfort, whether that's an emotional way or a physical way because you're feeling hungry. And then it's an immediate, okay, I'm going to eat something because of that. So if we can stretch out that thought process before eating and just think, okay, what do I actually need in this moment? And still giving yourself full permission of treats and wine and whatever, that's when I think you can be in a really nice and balanced place of truly giving your body what it needs in that moment as best as you can read in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's important to obviously have a lot of grace for ourselves around, like, we're not expecting perfection. It's not like Liz is saying every time you make a decision, you should be having this like pristine mindfulness experience where it's like, what does my body need? And no, does it really need chocolate? Like, I would guess that most of the time it doesn't really need chocolate, right? Like, it's not like chocolate's not a need in any sense of that word, but it is something where, again, it's just pausing for a second and thinking, okay, how is this next action going to affect me and my long-term health, my long-term happiness? And I definitely agree, having a bigger menu of selections to say like, okay, chocolate and wine is not my only option for dealing with the stress that I'm under or the emotional challenge that, like I said, I'm pretty sure every single person on the face of we'll just say the United States, I don't know about the entire planet, but the United States has experienced this at some point in the last 10 months. It's just having more options and not necessarily getting into this like really rigid habit where it's like that's your only thing that gives you pleasure. It's the only thing that decompresses stress, like all of that stuff. Because I think it really can turn into that, especially in a situation like what we're in now, where things that we would normally find enjoyment and pleasure and stress relief in, like socialization or like doing things outside the house, like all this stuff that is not available to so many people. I think it's natural that we would start to overuse food as a source of enjoyment. And it's, again, not saying that food should not be enjoyable whatsoever. It's just kind of like taking a step back and saying, okay, is food the only thing I'm using for enjoyment right now? And if that's the case, is there even one other thing that I could potentially choose to like start mixing it up and to not just have food as my only coping mechanism?
Exactly. Yeah. And it can be just a few seconds really of thinking about what you need. It doesn't need to be like a full-blown journaling session before you eat every single
An hour of meditating. Do I really want this chocolate?
Yeah, just a couple moments. And I will say too, it kind of depends on where you are in the journey. If you really feel like you don't have that control over food, you might need to take a little bit more time than someone who is more easily able to read their body and know how their physical symptoms, whether that's like hunger or fatigue or whatnot, and what their body actually needs. So it depends on where you are, but eventually the goal is that it can be a little bit more streamlined and you can maybe just take a couple moments to think about what you need.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to actually creating these habits and focusing on the process and reaching these weight loss goals, which again, may take longer than they would if you were going to do some kind of really extreme, unsustainable process. But if you're doing more of that, like 1% better kind of mindset or, the little habits that compound over time and really create those lasting results, how do you suggest that women make these goals? And like, what kind of behavior should they potentially be focusing on if they don't want to turn it into something that's like unsustainable?
Sure. One of my favorite educators, I guess, that I've learned about goal setting and habit formation is James Clear. His book, Atomic Habits, is just so phenomenal because you can apply it to your nutrition and so many other areas of your life. But I think that process of goal setting is first what I was saying before about really thinking about your desired identity and thinking about the type of person who you wish to become. What are the habits that they practice? And almost having that mentality of like, if I was that person today, right now, what are the actions that I would take on a day-to-day basis? And how would I act if I knew that I wasn't going to fail getting to that point? So anytime that you feel like your goals are just super challenging and unsustainable, and you feel like you're just constantly in that failure cycle of just setting a goal and not being able to meet it, you have to make that goal smaller and smaller and smaller. And even if it's to the point where you're like, I don't even know that this is significant, it is. You're still giving yourself, if anything, the mental benefit of you achieved something. And that was a goal that you set and you were able to achieve that. So when in doubt, make your goals small, small, small. And the method that I've kind of created when I work with my clients, as I've kind of alluded to as we've been talking, is really being in the middle of the extremes. And so I think half of it is using the science of nutrition, thinking about our intellect, making decisions that you know intellectually are going to make you feel better, or maybe you learn how to make yourself feel better. So that could be blood sugar management and managing your stress and eating to support your digestion. We have a lot of good science. That's kind of like the functional medicine background of what are some interventions that might help. But then I also think we can take the other side, which is the art of eating, which is more of the mindful eating and listening to your body. And it's really creating this combination of your head and your intellect, and then your heart and your body and your intuition, and then creating a habit based off of that. So going back to those process goals, I think that that's really great. And setting those markers of tracking your progress and tracking your habits can be really effective too. So I'm a really big fan of a food and mood journal. And I think that can really explain a lot behind our food habits. Generally, a food and mood journal doesn't have any sort of numerical data points on it. It truly is just, what did you eat? How did you feel before, after? What was your level of hunger before, your level of fullness after? It's very different than calorie counting or macro counting. And this almost goes into your kind of treatment plan, if you will, with more curiosity. So it's kind of like, I'm just going to gather all this data and think about what I'm doing. And then you can reflect over your week and say, okay, what am I seeing? What are the trends? What am I noticing that maybe at certain points of the day or times of the day, that's when I'm feeling these cravings kick in, or that's when I'm feeling my energy dip. So I think that's really great. But if that's totally unrealistic, I think you can even assess your markers, kind of what we were talking before, with a simple, just a check mark. Every day, are you completing your check mark? And that way you can see over the course of a week or a month how consistent that you've really been with your goals. So really, really tiny. And then having some method of tracking, I think, is really effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's some apps out there that are really helpful for habit tracking. Like, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the one that I haven't used them in a while, to be fair, but I also use the word analog comes to mind. It's not, I don't know if that's the right word for it. It's a pen and paper, like a actual planner that I use to actually plan my day and follow up on whether I completed the things that I wanted to complete. But there was this one app, and I feel like it was just called Productivity, where it literally allows you to set like recurring targets for whether it's daily targets, weekly targets, monthly targets. Like you could have it be something that shows you every day this checklist option that you can like check off the things that you did, and it'll send optional reminders like, oh, did you walk your dog today? Like that kind of stuff, which I think is really helpful because sometimes it's like you don't even like remember that you forgot to do something until it's like, oh, it's the end of the day already. I can't do it now. So I like having those tech options for reminders or tracking. Is there anything like tool-wise that you suggest to your clients for keeping track of those? Because obviously there's pen and paper, which is like, always available to everybody for the most part. But are there any more like technologically supportive tools that can help someone make sure that they're following up on what they committed to?
Yeah. So with the clients that I work with, I have an electronic medical record that has a food and mood journal attached to it, as well as a lifestyle journal. So specifically working with me, that's nice because it can interface with my profile and I can see what they're doing. But I don't know of any other apps necessarily, but I'm a big pen and paper person, and I think that engages in a couple more senses of like you're seeing it, you're writing it down, you're feeling the pen in your hand, and it seems really small, but that can make a big impact in everything. I actually know that James Clear, I think it's his team, but they have a journal that's a habit tracking journal. And then I use the full focus planner, which I think is one that you've used in the past too. Honestly, it comes down to whatever is going to be most realistic. I have some clients where they schedule it in their work calendar and they schedule little reminder blocks. Sometimes people have like family calendars that they keep in the kitchen, and that's somewhere. The point is that you're keeping it somewhere that it's visible and you'll see it every single day. So whether that's handwritten or in an app or in your work computer, whatever. But the point is that it's visible, that you can actually have that reminder to do that habit every day.
Yeah. Now, I will say the one thing I've noticed, and I don't know if you or your clients have seen this, for example, I put a reminder in my calendar to have like a tech shut off hour in the evenings. Like I get the alert and I'm like, all right, I guess I'm not doing that. So, and again, it's been a little bit worse lately because of like it's been pretty cold and wet and stuff around here, so there's not a lot to do like in the evening, that kind of thing. So my husband and I have just been watching. Right now we're really into The Crown on Netflix is the show that we're watching. So generally, like I've been pretty good about cutting down on phone screen time, mostly because I've like removed social media apps and I've put like usage timers on it. So if it goes above a certain time, it starts to like shut things off, which is really valuable. But it's just that reminder that comes up like tech shut off. I was like, well, there's really nothing else to do at this time of night with my husband other than just like watch this show together. So I've been a little bit not following through on that reminder that's come on my phone. But like I said, I think overall my tech use has generally reduced. Hopefully, I'm hoping. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'll go in these spurts of like getting off it and then I get sucked back in.
Right. But at least you're setting that goal of, okay, it seems like initially maybe it might have come from this standpoint of not being on social media or some like work email or something. So at least the transition, I would say, to Netflix is still a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Watching it's not, I guess fictional is kind of, if people watch that show, they'll know if I'm saying it's fictional. It's like, is it not? I don't know what it is. Historical fiction. But yeah, watching that's definitely different than me like reading emails or, scrolling through Facebook or something. But I feel like for me, it's a little tough because my husband, he really likes watching stuff like generally as like a wind down activity. And he doesn't have the same kind of job as I do. So normally he's not on screens all day. He's a teacher. So now he is on a screen all day, but he has a lot more like human interaction during the day, like in the real world. So being on a screen for entertainment doesn't feel quite as like problematic for him. So we're working on it, but I think our conversation today will definitely inspire me to kind of reassess my daily habits and just think through like, how are these habits either contributing to the outcomes that I want or taking away from the outcomes that I want. And like I said, even if it's just a couple of percentage points in either direction over time, if you're constantly, a little bit of something that's harmful over and over and over and over, in 6 months from now, it'll probably look a lot worse than it does in 6 days from now. So I think it's good to just kind of stop and reevaluate like, okay, what are my habits? Should I like change stuff up a little bit so I'm not just heading down this road of, yes, I love the wine, it tastes great, but is it something that I really need every single night, or should I start finding some other options to mix it up a little bit?
Exactly. And that compounding mindset is so freeing too, where if you do want wine or ice cream or whatever it is, that one instance isn't going to change your total progress. So I think that's really helpful for people too, just to know that it's the compound effect, which yes, takes a little bit more time, but it gives you the flexibility that I think most people really, really need in order to be successful long-term.
Yeah. None of us like to be patient. That's the,
no.
that's the problem is it's like, we want the result now. Any last minute words of wisdom from you, Liz? This has been a really great conversation. So if there's anything else you'd like to share, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think we had a really good conversation. And I think this really talks about the high level points that I work with my clients on. I think just knowing that if you had one takeaway from this message today, it really is that if you feel like your habits just have so much resistance and you feel like you are giving and exerting all of your energy every day and just food is taking up the most mental real estate in your head, that you should try to make it a little bit smaller and think about where you fall in those extremes of whether that's dieting or not even caring about food or not using your intellect about food and nutrition. So live in that gray area, live in that middle ground. And that really is, I think, the most transformative place as far as sustainable weight loss.
Yeah, I love it. And really sustainable, any outcome
Anything.
that we're looking to accomplish. Where can our audience find more about you and more about your methodology?
Yeah. So my website is functionallyliz.com. So like functional medicine. And I have a lot of blog posts and recipes and a couple freebie options. One of the freebies that I have on my website is called a hunger discovery reflection. So that helps you with identifying the difference between hunger and appetite, what I was talking about before. And I would recommend downloading that, even if you don't feel like it's a big issue for you, because it's interesting just to know what your physical cues are for hunger. And maybe you've never really even thought about that before. So that's a really cool handout that I have. And then I'm pretty active on Instagram too. So my handle is the same, functionally Liz. Those would probably be the two best places to find me.
Yeah. And I'll second that thing about just being aware of what your hunger signals are. Cause I think so many people don't think they have an issue with hunger and satiety, awareness. And a lot of the clients that I've worked with never really understood what their true hunger signals were beyond just that stomach hunger, right? I think everybody kind of assumes that's what hunger is that your stomach feels hungry. But I know for me personally, if I'm underfed, I get cold, my body temperature changes. I'll get a headache or something. So there's other stuff that can indicate hunger before I even feel that stomach hunger. And it's something that if you're not aware of it, then it's you can't really appropriately respond to it. And then, if you're ignoring it for longer, then it turns into this now I'm in the kitchen and I'm just snacking on everything because I didn't eat enough during the day because I wasn't paying attention to it. So again, not something that we necessarily get taught or most people don't necessarily know about, but I think the more understanding you can have of your own body, the better. So I would definitely encourage people to check out that freebie. And we will link to that in the show notes. So that way, if you want to check that out, or if you want to follow Liz on Instagram or go check out her website, we'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. And then the final question I have for you, Liz, there's no wrong answer. So I always like to make sure people don't feel pressured to have the perfect answer here. But in your opinion, what do you believe makes a woman more than a body?
Great question. I think what makes someone more than just their body is the sense of community, which may seem kind of weird, but I think every day we are constantly exchanging energy, whether that's through the words that we're speaking or the actions we're taking or the money we're spending. And really the sense of community is a way that we can act beyond our body and connect with other people. And it relates to food so much because food is just more than what's on your plate, and it's the history and your culture and your traditions and all of that. So I think people are more than just a body because we are all in it together and we're all a sense of just beings exchanging energy every single day. So I would say community.
Awesome. I love that response. So thank you, Liz, so much for spending this time with us on the show today and sharing your expertise. And thank you to all of you for hanging out with us. We will see you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Hey there, Laura here again. Thank you so much for listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Your time is your most precious resource, and I'm so grateful that you choose to spend some of it with me. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast and want to continue supporting my work on this show, I would very much appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes. By leaving a 5-star review, you'll help others find the show and help me spread my message to a larger audience. You can go to fedandfearless.com/review to find a button that'll take you right to iTunes to leave your review. And I have a special gift for you as a thank you for helping me share the podcast. Once you leave your review, send a screenshot of the review to hello@lauraschoenfeldrd.com. Or you can DM it to me on Instagram @lauraschoenfeldrd. Once you do, I'll share a free copy of my Overcoming Undereating ebook. Then share a favorite podcast episode in your Instagram stories and tag me @lauraschoenfeldrd. And I'll also give you a free copy of my 14-day calorie challenge recipe guide. Together, these bonuses are worth $44 and will help you become Fed and Fearless. And you'll get them absolutely free for just helping me grow the podcast. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you here next week for the latest episode.